So, we're starting a topic on Christmas Eve day, and it's considered a miraculous event, pre event for many peoples of the world. And a baby was born of a virgin birth. Nellie?
Yeah, and I didn't know this. You should keep going,
Oh,
really. This
okay.
maybe keep on going, Linda, because I'm not
Okay.
the expert on this.
Okay.
You are.
Okay, so this was my expertise. It's that was quite a leap of faith as a young child, especially because I didn't know what a virgin was. So you don't know that when you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Maybe, later. I knew that late, what it meant, but I knew it was something special, that it meant a halo. It meant, um, this blue robe. It meant a special placement in the world. And every year we celebrated this, that there was a virgin birth.
Something that's so out of the ordinary, something that's so extra special, miraculous. Not, this baby, now I'm going to speak about outside of my expertise. This baby was born not from the usual way, material way, where a sperm and an egg meet up and create a new life. No, this baby was born some other whole different way, huh?
Other different way that was considered holy, was considered, more than just this human existence. And I think it really did set up a seeking in me, a seeking for something more to life, that there's more than I can just see. That's how I started. There's a term for this, a spiritual seeker, that often is the way many of us find Buddhism.
And that's really the topic of the week for Linda and I, this word spiritual. And there is this sense, um, I think a deeply conditioned sense. I'm even going to say that most of us learn this in a deep way, that spiritual is something really different from secular, or secular is something really different from religion. And it turns out in our study that that's actually a rather newish idea. This idea of splitting it up that way has not existed until fairly recently. We didn't have the time this morning to study exactly when that term came, but we have time this week while we're on this topic to look a
Right.
little more deeply at that.
Right, right. And considering that split, that modern split, gave us, a way to talk about the distinctions between the secular and the spiritual, between the religious and the spiritual. I mean, the first time I heard it was with my mom. She split it and said, "I'm spiritual but not religious." And, I come to see, oh, what did that mean for her? It meant that she was trying to make a distinction between a religion that still practiced things that she couldn't get on board with, or that were happening that she really wanted to distance herself from. So she made a split that helped me kind of consider, okay, what is the split I make around being spiritual or not spiritual?
And part of the reason we brought up this topic, and
Yes.
is that a few people have spoken to us about this word spiritual recently, and so it really hit us. But I mean, hit us like think, not yeah, about this more. But they've talked about it in different ways, right?
Right,
Why don't you take
right.
it for a moment, Linda?
Well, especially in reading our book or in reading our fundamentals of the practice of reflective meditation, we use the word spiritual friend as the translation for Kalyanamitta. And we didn't even think about that. We just used it. It just came with the territory. We hadn't really contemplated how else would we talk about, our spiritual friendship, our sangha. But a few people in my group said, "I don't use the word spiritual. What do you mean?" And it was like, oh, I hadn't thought about it. So now we're thinking about it.
Right. So we'll go back and look at that word in the Pali language and see, where we land. But here's the thing. Personally, I like the word spiritual. So as you were talking, I thought, no, oh no, I don't want to. These spiritual friends, we're different. We're friends in a different territory. We're not, not a lot of overlap, but there is something special or different, maybe different about my spiritual friends than what I would do with some of my other friends, the conversations I've had.
Right.
Anyway, I'm getting off on a bit of a tangent.
But not much, because I think there's also the idea that reflective meditation is not very spiritual practice because we don't do much ritual. We have our ritual of sitting and reflecting and sharing, but we don't do a lot of other rituals, which are often deemed how you see the spiritual enacted.
Well, the other thing that we do and is that we kind of leave it, to each of us meditators to see what happens and really to see if what happens we perceive it as spiritual, because I perceive it as more spiritual. My definition goes back to seeing something, just there's a bigger world than what I can perceive, that there's more to this life, to this existence, to this whole thing we're doing, living, than I can find, that I know about. And that I see that in my meditation in little ways.
And it is talked about in the Buddha Dharma teachings. I found that very easily in the teaching of conditionality, just in the fact that there's always more into any situation than we could know, that there's
Hmm.
always more conditions. And you talked about it as conditionality also really making you see that you're not such a solid self.
Right. Which is really I mean, I think about spirituality in some ways. I mean, we're going to talk about the topic all week, so that's good. We too can develop our ideas about this. But something beyond the limitations of I've experienced in this, isolated sense of self that's really
Right.
separate. That as that kind of keeps as I breathe air into that concept in some ways, as a metaphor, I'm talking out, not as a breathing exercise, but though it could be, that whole idea of self expands, and then my sense of what is and what's possible expands. And that feels very spiritual to me.
Mhm. Mhm. We've, yeah, Nelly, I mean, I agree. Um, and I think something expansive is a direction that I've sought. That's a kind of that is something spiritual seeking. You're looking for something more or bigger or larger. Um, some of the other words that people have used is, something has more heart or has more spirit or more soul, or, it's a higher mind. Like there's a lot of ways this is talked about, and we're really interested in how people are talking about spirituality. What does it mean to you? Do you use the word? Is it something that, um, that has been a part of your practice or your seeking? We're hoping you'll help us with this one.
Yeah, so perhaps that's where we should end this for today and let people meditate and see what arises.
Okay. I think I can't remember who's on the bells now.